So this week and next week, I want to focus a little bit on vision for our life. I want to talk about how can we have a healthy, God-sized vision for our lives. What would a God-sized vision look for you and for me? And we all live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and almost every company here has some very inspiring vision, isn't it? So I picked up a couple of vision statements that are very popular. This is one of my favorite ones. It's from Nike. That's a brand I like. I used to wear those shoes. They said to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. That's Nike's vision. And Bill Bowerman, who founded Nike, actually said this even cool. He said, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So that, by definition, makes everyone here an athlete. Do you feel good about yourself? There you go. So go buy their shoes is what their logo is, right? But that's a powerful vision statement. And then, if you want to think of another vision statement, here we have our very own Elon Musk coming up with this vision statement. Look at this. We are going to land people on Mars by 2025. Wow. Just a few words. It's a big, hairy, audacious vision. And people thought he was crazy, and looks like he might actually pull it off. He's working on taking 80 people to Mars in 100 days by 2025. Vision. Grandiose visions. Do you have a vision for your life? What do you want to be remembered for? The day you leave this world, when people come, what do you want them to look at your life and say, here lived a man who, and you can fill the rest of it. Do we have a God-sized vision for our lives? Well, we can say those are grandiose visions. I don't have a vision to go to Mars. I just have very small visions. Maybe if you're young and at school, your vision might just be to get through high school. Or have a particular interest in a career, like I want to become a doctor or an engineer. Or if you're parents and if you have kids, your vision could simply be, this is the reason we came to the Bay Area. We wanted our children to have a better life. If you are in school and college, you're about to finish, your vision is to have an aspiring career. Or if you're working, who knows, maybe you are really desiring to become a CEO one day. Or if you're young and you're single and one of your dreams is to find this ideal life partner who's going to love you and be the most awesome person in this world, or you probably have a heart for social justice and want to see something changed. Or if you're a little older and you've been reasonably successful in life, your vision is all about, I just want to have a decent retirement, man. I'm just dreaming about retiring and life after retirement. I'm already looking at which countries to visit and, have a bucket list. But you see, whatever your vision is, it just didn't happen like that. There are things that influenced you and me to come up with this vision. Our worldview defines our vision. It informs our vision. It influences our vision. And so I want to invite you today to join me in hearing from Jesus some powerful words on how we can identify the things that influence our vision and follow our dreams that are as big as God's dreams for our lives and not just small dreams for our life. And Jesus, in this passage that we just read, he gives three distinctive statements about things that influence our vision for our life. He tells us basically how to live our lives, how to follow a God-sized dream for our life. And if you know, this is the concluding part of the Sermon on the Mount, as it is famously known. This is the greatest sermon ever preached by the greatest preacher who ever lived, and that was Jesus. A sermon that inspired and transformed individuals and nations. These are powerful words. These are the words of Jesus himself. And let's see what he has to say when he finishes this sermon with these powerful principles that we can apply to our lives. So he's talking about three different things in this passage that he says influence our vision. He talks about two ways that influence our vision. He talks about two groups of people who can influence our vision. And he talks about two ways in which we can follow these principles that will influence our vision. Two ways, two people, and two kinds of decisions. Let's look at the first one in verses 7 to 14. He talks about verse 13. He says, there are two ways. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many. In some translations call it the wide gate and the narrow gate, but if you look at the original words that Jesus used, he's talking of, basically there are two ways to live your life. There is an easy way that a lot of people choose to live life, and then there is a hard way that only very few people choose to live life. So the easy way, it looks like it's a wide open way, everybody does what they want, but there is a hard way, which is a narrow way that he's going to define for us, that only a few choose. Now this is where it hits home for us in a place like the Bay Area, where it's so common in your places of work or elsewhere to hear people say, all religions are the same. There are several ways to God. Just let people do what they want to do. You have your way to find God and live life based on what you decide. I have my way to find God and live my life based on what I decide. You know, that's actually the most disrespecting thing to say to somebody. Because if you go superficially, it sounds very nice. Wow, this is such a very wonderful person. He's so loving and so understanding. But it's actually not that loving if you take a little deeper, because all ways do not lead to the same God. You know, if you look at the religion of Hinduism, Hinduism believes in reincarnation. And then you go and talk to a Muslim friend, he's going to tell you he does not believe in reincarnation. And one religion says your good works decide what happens in your next life. And the other religion says, no, it's ultimately God who decides whether you get to be with him or go to hell. And then there is a group, which is a larger majority group, who are atheist or agnostic, who do not claim to believe in God or life after death. And that's the group that we rub shoulders with most of the time in the Bay Area. But even atheism is a religion, because it says, when it makes a definitive claim that says there is no way to God, that becomes an absolute statement too. And when he looks down upon a religious person, whether it's a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, and say your way, that your God is the only way to truth, is wrong, he's saying that my way, which believes in no God, is the way to truth. It's a self-defeating argument. So here comes Jesus. What does Jesus say? He says there are two ways. There are two ways. One leads to life, and the other leads to destruction. If you don't find the way that leads to life, you cannot have a vision that brings forth life. You know, I was visiting a Jewish Holocaust museum in Washington, D.C. I'm sure if any of you have been there, it's a free museum. You can walk in, but it's very moving, very graphic, all the things you get to see there. And they had a table where actual Holocaust survivors would sit and talk to visitors. So I stood in the line and a got to meet these two survivors of this Jewish Holocaust. Both of them were Jews who had survived the Holocaust. They were very old, maybe in their 80s or 90s. And they were sharing their story. And they were both coming from totally two different perspectives. One survivor, you could see he was very happy, very cheerful, and he was actually, this was a conversation they both were having with each other because they were getting introduced and we were all just standing and watching. And they were just interviewing one another, and he said, how did you handle life after your Holocaust experience where you survived? One guy who was cheerful said, I believed in God being bigger than Hitler. I believed God being bigger than the greatest evil humanity has ever seen, and I had learned to trust Him, and it helped me to forgive the very perpetrators who did this to me, so I've lived a happy and a content life. And the other one, who was also a Jewish survivor, looked at him and said, good for you, man. I could never do that. I could never accept that God would allow this, and until today, he confessed that he has been carrying anger and hatred and bitterness, and it just spills off. You can see that coming off of him. Some of us have heard the story of Louis Zamperini, from his book Unbroken. Louis Zamperini was this fighter pilot who goes down during World War II, is captured by the Japanese, is tortured as a prisoner of war for several years, and just by sheer grit and perseverance, he survives the Japanese concentration camps, and the Allied forces rescue, and he comes back to the United States. And then begins his life, which is nasty. He's angry, he has nightmares, he wakes up and he drinks to forget the memories of what has happened, and he's married to this beautiful girl. He just can't live his life. To the rest of the world, he was a war hero, but he could not live his life peacefully until one day, his wife takes him to hear this young man by the name of Billy Graham speak in Los Angeles about the God of love that touched him. And his life vision changed forever after that. And the rest is history. We need to find the narrow way, the hard way. That is what Jesus is going to tell them. But he's also going to tell them, and people are going to see the hard way is actually the easy way. What is this hard way? Jesus is going to tell them, you know what this hard way is? What this narrow way is? I am the way. He's not giving them a new religion. He's not giving them a new philosophy. He says, I'm going to give myself to you. I am the way. The hard way is actually the easy way. I will show you the way to God, and I will take you to God so your life here can matter on earth. I will take your small human-sized vision and transform this into a God-sized vision so your life can be meaningful even here on earth. Jesus meets this very messed up Samaritan woman who is completely neglected by everyone in her community she lived with. Imagine walking out of your home and nobody wants to see your face, and she comes and she has this encounter with Jesus. In John chapter 4, you see this lengthy dialogue that goes between them. She seeks pleasure and seeks acceptance, wants to be loved, wants to be accepted. She's tried 5 people in her life, didn't work, and now lives with another guy. Even now she's not satisfied. She seeks Jesus. She finds Jesus, who points this truth to her and says, you're thirsty, only I can quench your thirst. She surrenders and takes this narrow way of embracing Jesus and finds life. She gets a new vision. She came in with a different vision before she saw Jesus. She walks back, her life vision has changed. She doesn't even realize it has changed because she goes and tells these people about who Jesus is. These very people who would not see her eye to eye, who would not acknowledge her, who hated her, are now actually listening to her. And they want to come and see who is this Jesus who could transform a life like this. Imagine that vision. She had zero influence in this village and now becomes the chief influencer through whom this entire village gets transformed. Wow, what a life. What she could not do the whole of her life happened in just that one moment after an encounter with Jesus. What is informing our vision? Have you found this narrow way? The wide way is all about ourselves, but the narrow way is Jesus. What we believe influences our vision. Secondly, he talks of two types of people. Who we follow influences our vision. Nowadays, people on average follow around 200 people on Facebook and follow at least a dozen people on Twitter. And with Instagram and Snapchat, I actually don't know the metrics. The numbers are even higher. So we're actually always following someone or something, what people say. Well, Jesus is telling, be careful who you follow, because there are real people who tell you real stuff and there are fake people who tell you fake stuff. Because people are all the time trying to sell us something, isn't it? They're trying to sell us the truth about life. You know, from fake news related to elections to our faith, we are constantly bombarded by people who want to influence us. From, how you can get rich quickly, inspirational speakers, to religious leaders who want to do the same and tell you how your life can be awesome very fast and very quick, and whether they are gurus or pastors or priests. If you're going to keep following them, that's going to influence your vision. It's very sad, even inside Christianity they are there, and some of them have a huge following. They own TV channels, some even own like multiple private jets. They were in the news recently, right? Jesus is saying, don't trust everybody, man. But look at their fruits. He doesn't tell you, look at the teaching, look at what they say and try to discern. It's very simple. Just look at their life. Look at the fruit of their life. Because then you will very quickly see these guys are building their own kingdoms and they're using you for that. Don't be naive and give in to them. Don't just trust anybody. Look at their fruits. Look at their life, how they live. It's very hard to know the fruit of a person when you see them on TV or hear them on radio. You can say all the nice things and project a beautiful vision for the rest of us, and they're like, wow, if only I am like that. But when you get to know them personally is when you will see the real deal. I've got to know several of these high-profile leaders and been on the other side, and I have seen the sad state of their self-centeredness and how they manipulate people. They have their own universities and their ministries, but they lack financial accountability, accountability to truth on what they preach. They enjoy unquestionable authority, full of pride, falling to money and sex and all sorts of things. Don't follow these guys. Don't make your vision based on these inspirational guys. You're going to fall flat. Don't build your vision looking at them. It's pretty straightforward, he says. And finally, he comes to this part where I want to spend most of our time with, on verses 21 to 27. The first two are about finding the way and identifying who we follow. The third one is about us, about you and me. How we follow influences our vision. This is the most graphic and the scariest description. Usually when someone gives a speech or a talk, or if you have given a presentation in your workplace or a conference, you save the best for the last, right? You want to leave with a roar. You want to hit the audience with the best you've got. This is not how you would end your speech. Where Jesus throws the most scariest, most difficult thing that any audience would want to hear. He talks of two people who are trying to build a house. It's a very simple illustration. Two people are building a house. One is building it on the rock, and the other is building it on the sand. We know the story very well. But there are three similarities between these two groups of people. And it's fascinating to see how eerily similar both these groups of people are. The first one that is similar about both of them is that they both know God intellectually. You see, they say, Lord, Lord, did we not do all these things in your name? You know, the word Lord actually translates to Yahweh, the name for God in the Old Testament. So when someone says Lord, it means they actually know a lot about this God. Secondly, they use this repetitive word, Lord, Lord. You know, when it's used twice, it's supposed to intensify the emotions of it. You remember when Jesus was on the cross, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? So there is an intense emotionality in their relationship with God. They know God intellectually. In their hearts, they are drawn to God, or they connect with God. You know, they call God as Jesus, Lord, or Jesus, Daddy, or Abba, or whatever names, you know, you can think of. And not just that, it gets even more scary. He says, they both serve God. He says, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not do mighty works in your name? You know, I've been doing several ministries. We are active in our church and leadership and so many other things. And he says, you can have all these three and still miss it. That's scary. That's super scary. Both of them build this house. What is building this house? This is what you do with the efforts that God has blessed you with. So from outside, both the houses look beautiful. There are these two houses on the hill. When you drive by and you look at them, they're like beautiful. They're awesome. But the difference was inside. You know, you can be an intellectual Christian. You can be emotional Christian. You can be a socially activist Christian. But Jesus can still look at you and say, I never knew you. Scary, isn't it? Unfortunately, this defines most people in the church today. And there is no way for us to know, but God knows. There are two key differences, though, between these two types of people. The first one, he builds it on the rock. It's not just a rock, it's this huge boulder on which the house is built. The second house actually did not have a foundation at all. If you think about it, he's just so arrogant, he thinks, hey, I know how to build a house. I know I just have to buy these things. You know, if you've been first-time home buyers and you spend the next 1 year in Home Depot, you're looking at things, you know exactly what's wrong in your house and what to fix and what to switch. You know, I want to change these granite countertops in my kitchen. This sucks. Right? Or you want to change the flooring in your house or whatever. So you basically learn after a year or two what your house needs. So this guy says, yeah, I know how to fix my house. I don't think I need a foundation. The house itself was the foundation for him. What was external, he thought is all that matters and never cared about what's internal. He thought you can just trust in the work of his hands. I'm a smart guy. Come on, man, I'm an engineer. And I code, and the things that I code and I do is what makes this world run. You telling me I don't know how to live my life? I'm a good guy. I don't hurt anybody. And that's where his faith is. Faith in the work of our hands. If I just have enough money for the future, if my children can get the best education, if I have this good health, if I just take care of my health, I'll be fine. But if you look at it, it's all about me at the end. It's a faith in self. There's just no foundation. But nobody knows from outside. Everybody looks the same. But the biggest difference is how they both respond to the words of Jesus. Because that's what Jesus says. He says, and everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, or do not do them. You know, they both hear the words of Jesus. And what were his words? He's been speaking to them from chapter 5. And you know, if you've been at Spectrum long enough, you've heard this before. This is the gospel. This is the good news that Jesus says. He talks about, I'm actually building a new kingdom, guys. And I want to invite you to be part of this kingdom. This kingdom I am building is an upside-down kingdom. It's not like a kingdom of the world. So he picks 12 ordinary guys who do not have any fame or reputation. He puts them before this multitude who seek to him. And he says, this is what's going to happen to these guys who are going to follow me. I'm going to give them a God-sized vision for their lives. I'm going to give them a kingdom-sized vision for their lives. And guess how that life is going to be? If you want to be part of my kingdom, so you can also have this God-sized vision and a kingdom-sized vision, this is how it happens. First, he says it's a blessed experience, but blessed are the poor in spirit. And he starts right there. He says you need to first be poor. You need to first empty yourself. You need to recognize that your foundation is empty. And you need to feel sorrow for your sin. He said, blessed are those who mourn that we are messed up. And blessed are those who are meek. That really changes you. You transform from being a proud person to becoming a humble person. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because now you actually want your life to be holy. That's how he says you enter into my kingdom. And then you can get to see this kingdom-sized vision. As long as you're outside of this kingdom, you cannot see this kingdom dream that I have for you. And when you enter my kingdom this way, when you mourn, when you are meek, when you are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, he says you're the poor in heart, you will see God. You'll be able to see through all of life through the eyes of Jesus. And you will start living this kingdom life. And if you live this kingdom life, it's not actually going to be a fun life. You're going to be persecuted. People are going to come after you because you're going to be messing people up. You're going to be messing people's dreams. You're going to be telling them you're being selfish and living for yourself, but God wants you to live for Him. And then he goes on in the rest of his sermon to talk about how do you live your daily life on faith? How do you trust God? How do you give? How do you pray? How do you fast? How do you deal with money? How do you deal with relationships? If you're a kingdom person, He's going to change everything about your life. His kingdom vision permeates all areas of our lives, but for that you need to be in His kingdom. You're either in or you're out. There's no in between. Jesus doesn't say, oh, this guy whose house, it didn't stand when the storms hit, he's a backsliding Christian. You know the word backsliding is not there in the entire Bible. Please, if you find that, let me know. You're either all in or you're all out. And that's what this parable says. Your house is going to stand when the storms hit, or it's going to go crashing down when the storms hit. It's never going to be a comfortable life. Is your life very comfortable right now? And you're not risking anything for Jesus? You're not getting out of your comfort zone for Jesus? If you're not being persecuted? You're not talking about like the missionary guys in certain countries who are literally being killed for their faith, but your life is not that radical that it doesn't disturb people. Then you need to ask this question, do I really know this Jesus? Or rather, you need to ask this question, will Jesus say that I know Him? Because if not, we are probably living in our self-efforts irrespective of what we claim to believe. We are trusting in our own worth and our own ability. But if you respond to Jesus, you will immediately see. The moment you enter His kingdom, you will see it's not about you anymore. You cannot save yourself. Your best works are not good enough for Jesus in his kingdom. They are like filthy rags, is what he says. And he says, you need me. I mourned for you. I'm meek. I am the righteous one. I gave myself for you. You need me. Come to me, Jesus says, and surrender and hear my words, and you will have a totally different vision. And the key to that, he says, is not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. What is the Father's will? Well, once you are a kingdom man and a kingdom woman, it's no longer your will. The Father's will is not that people in the kingdom of Christ are perfect people, but the people who are in the kingdom of Christ are repentant Christians. They're not perfect Christians, but they are the quickest to recognize when anyone points to them, they have a problem, that this is my problem, and they're willing to take it to God and fix it. They're not the ones who stay in sinful rebellion, in sinful lifestyle. You remember a whole generation of Israelites got wiped out and could not enter Canaan? So Father's will is that we be authentic Christians in God's kingdom. And that's why the world hates us, because we are not authentic. And the Father's will is for us to be disciples. The Father's will for your life, if you are in school, is not to find a career that will help you make the most money or give you the safest future, but risk everything for His sake. I'm sure you all remember Hannah Cooper, our Pastor Tan's daughter, who's also a missionary we support, living right now in this country in Central Asia, which is absolutely unsafe for anyone who calls himself a Christian, and let alone a Christian young girl. Why would she do that? Isn't it crazy? She could have just stayed here and gotten a very nice job and made a lot of money. Why do people do that? Well, God may not be calling you to go as a missionary to places like that. But He first wants our heart, and then He wants to see what is it in your life that shows that you know me. The Father's will for your marriage is that you're the first one to say sorry. And let Him use your brokenness for His glory. The Father's will for our job is not to find a comfortable place and settle down that gives me money to feed my family, but it is to use my gifts and my talents that He has given me to bless others. In short, our vision, this God-sized vision, this kingdom vision, is shaped by how we can live not for ourselves but for others. If you wrote a vision statement for your life and you think about it, what is my vision in life? If I die today, what will I be remembered for? And if it's all about me, and my family, that's not a kingdom vision. In a kingdom vision, sacrifice becomes the norm than the exception. Repentance becomes the norm than the exception. Not perfection, but repenting, transforming Christians. And being focused on others, not myself, becomes the norm. And you know who can do this? Only those who have tasted the love of Christ deeply can aspire to dream these visions. The greatest men who have ever lived, I remember till today, are those who have lived for others and not themselves. Jim Elliot died the day he landed in this jungle to tell them about Jesus. Dietrich Bonhoeffer died in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. All of these 12 disciples died. They were martyred. But God gave them a God-sized vision through which they trusted Him. They lived according to their Father's will and made an impact. Oh, don't tell me about those people. I can never do that. They're just exceptions. Well, then why would Jesus talk about it? They chose to live for others. Is our vision shaped by others' focus or our self-focus? Steve Jobs' stepdaughter, I think, has come up with a book. I'm not sure if it's already published yet or not. Small Fry. It's a very disturbing book. It's been read by business magazines and journals, and it's gotten some people, including Steve's wife, to respond. Where it talks about how she says her father was this horrible guy who would say nasty things at her. People already knew Steve Jobs could be a tough guy in his place of work. I mean, he's left a legacy. He's done great, innovative things, and many of us are holding his products in our hands and in our homes, but those products may be obsolete in 5 to 10 years. And if all that remains to be remembered about Steve Jobs is what comes out in a book like Small Fry by his own daughter, that's sad. But we're chasing that vision because that's what the world says is cool. That's a vision that's inspired by the world. And it's always about performance and external appearance and instant gratification. What are we building our house upon? If you drive through 880 and see Mission Peak from a distance, you can see a patch that's ugly on Mission Peak. That was actually a landslide that happened in 1998 during the famous El Nino rains. And there was this massive patch of land by 1,200 meters long that just went down. And there was a house at the foot of the hill in the Niles district that was built on these sands that literally got washed away. If our life, everything that we have to show about our life is based on what we have built with our own abilities and efforts, and there is no foundation, it will be like this house that went down. So Jesus closes his Sermon on the Mount challenging us not to be like those guys who put faith in themselves, but to be like the one who can go to him, where he is the life. Which way are you following today? The wide way or the narrow way? Who are you following? Who are the voices that inspire you? And whose vision are you following, and how are you following? Are you a person who's quick to repent? Whose life is characterized by living for others? Or fundamentally, our life is about building God's kingdom than our own kingdom? If not, I invite you to pray and seek this God-sized vision for your lives. I don't know what it is, but God will reveal it to you. When you seek him, when you enter his kingdom, and when you taste the love of Jesus, you will have this God-sized vision. And he doesn't promise happiness ever after, but he promises that it will pave a path for eternity in his kingdom. Shall we pray?